Hello! Guess what I read? This is How You Lose the Time War. I remember seeing this book blow up on social media, especially Twitter. So much so that even though it's not usually something I would read, I bought it. Now granted, it was sitting on my shelf for a while, but I finally got around to actually reading it. And though I had heard such good things about it, I didn't actually know too much. I kind of stayed away from what people were saying about it because since everybody was saying it was so good, I was like, I kind of want to go in a little bit blind. The only thing I knew was like the very basic premise. It's two agents who are on two different sides of this time war and they're sending letters to each other. That's like all I knew. But overall, I'd say it was a good read. I enjoyed it. It doesn't take a lot to keep my interest though, so the only thing that's important to note is that this really isn't a book where you can just kind of half like listen to it if you're doing an audiobook and not really paying attention. Like you actually have to be paying attention or you're gonna be lost. And even if you're fully paying attention, you could still get lost. The beginning of the book, I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I like this. What is going on? Like it was a lot because the book starts out and you're right in the middle of everything and you don't really have a lot of context and you don't know what's going on, and it took quite a while for me to get my bearings on what was happening because I did not really understand the two sides that they were on. But to put it in like basic terms, you have red is one agent and blue is the other agent. Red is on the tech side of the time war and blue is on like the garden environmental side of the time war. And for the longest time, they kept talking about strands, and I don't know if I missed it when I first read through it or what sort of context was there to understand what strands were, but I was not understanding what strands were. In fact, I googled them to be like, what do they mean by strands in this book? Turns out they're like alternate worlds in a multiverse or like alternate timelines, because this is the time war, right? So the whole premise of these two sides, these two factions, is that they're altering various events in these strands or worlds that then puts things in their favor. So ultimately either side is trying to control like the strands of time. That's like what this war is about. Each side is altering events to their advantage. And red and blue are like one of the top agents, top spies, whatever, of their factions. Maybe not the top, but they're both really good at what they do. And they catch each other's attention because they're both very good and they're on opposite sides. That they start leaving letters for each other. And as the letters continue and continue, the prose and what they write about is how they more or less fall in love with each other because they're actually bearing themselves to each other, and the prose is so beautiful they're falling for one another. This entire book, the prose is very beautiful. I would describe it very similarly to like a bunch of poems but in story form, or like song lyrics, because sometimes how they're describing things, it was confusing to me because it was more prosy, if that makes sense. It was very lyrical and not very literal, so sometimes it was hard to keep up. I would say like the hardest thing for me to visualize while reading was the various ways that they would give each other letters. Since technically the correspondence that they're having with each other would be considered treason, since they are enemies, they have to be very creative in the ways that they are sending these letters to each other. And sometimes the description of how they're doing it wasn't really making a lot of sense to me. Like in one letter, it was delivered in tea leaves. Yeah, I don't know. I think another, there was like lava or something involved. I still like trying to visualize it. I had a tough time being like, wait, how are we, what? But at least that wasn't very pivotal to the plot because ultimately the words they were writing to each other was way more important than the means in which they got it to each other. So I was like, okay, whatever. But basically each chapter is alternating between red and blue, and they always all end with a letter from the other. And slowly but surely you do kind of get the sense that everything is in a multiverse from how they're talking about crossing each other's paths and where they are and what part of the world they're at. Like there's just a lot going on. And one thing that was never really made clear in the book to me, and I think it was intentionally ambiguous, was the timeline of this, which ironic because they're jumping around between timelines, but sometimes between these letters I couldn't tell if it was like years in between these letters or if this was something that was happening in quick succession. I wasn't super sure, but again, ultimately that doesn't really matter to the plot of the book. But as these letters keep getting written back and forth, they get emotionally involved with each other. Like at this point, they would have an emotional relationship. They like each other. Sometimes the letters would be ended with yours, Red, until eventually it got all the way to I love yous. Yeah, it went all the way there. But as these letters progress, on Red's side, there's some suspicion. Somehow, some way, they know that Red and Blue are crossing paths. And so they want Red to initiate contact with Blue and basically poison Blue. And so Red has to go through with it. However, she intentionally writes the letter in a way that Blue would absolutely understand that that's not her normal writing. And so something's not right. And she does that. But Blue, knowing that if they don't take this poison and they don't die, people are going to start suspecting Red, that somehow Red might be involved with Blue and this could turn out bad for Red. So Blue eats the poison, which there's like a second letter hidden in all of this to like reveal the truth. But somehow it seems like Red was able to convey that there was an antidote for Blue to take so Blue could be okay. But because of all this, now people know that Red's loyalties have shifted, and so she gets captured and is thrown into a cell, most likely to stay there for good. But before that happens and she fades away into history for good, Blue manages to come in and save the day. And I guess if this is all happening between strands of time, that would mean that like Blue hacked time? Does that make sense? I guess so. And it ends with them basically kind of both being like, I don't give a who wins the time war. I just want to be with you. It's us against the world is how the story ends, which then all kind of folds into the name of the book. This is how you lose the time war. So they technically lost the time war together by forging a new path for themselves. And they think that they'd be able to do that because they are both the best at what they do, so they can probably evade either side's forces that would try to stop them. I think I would describe it as an homage to the saying or just the concept of love transcends time, or love is everything, you know, love above everything else. Love stands the test of time. Any concept like that is kind of what I think was imbued into this story. But there were times where I was listening to the audiobook, and if I wasn't paying attention, I'd have to go back and re-listen to something or like ensure that I was locked in, because there was a lot of information that was happening, and since everything wasn't very clear, you really had to pay attention for all the little details so you could actually understand what was going on. It's especially hard to understand what's going on when like the text side and the garden side, how they're described makes them sound like more concepts rather than this whole full-blown faction, even though that's what I think it's like a mix of both. But I can like understand the vibe of what's happening here. I'm picking up what you're putting down. And to top it all off, the audiobook was only about 4 hours long, and if you were just reading the book, it's 198 pages. So it's really not that big of a time commitment. So if you were on the fence about it, you didn't know if you wanted to read it, honestly, you can knock it out really quickly and it really wouldn't matter either way. And one thing that I thought was pretty fun that's in the physical book is that at the end of it, there's a whole section of topics and questions for discussion. Like if you were reading this for book club, can you see this? Oh gosh. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. And it has a couple pages of discussion questions. So if you were reading this for a book club, which is why I read it this time around, there's already built-in questions there, so you can have a nice like discussion with other people, because since this is so poetic, there's definitely a lot of different interpretations that can be said about this book. And discussing it with somebody else, you might realize, oh, they visualize this whole world, this whole plot very, very differently than I did. Because even me saying now how I took it doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. This is just how I understood the book the best that I could in a way that made sense to my brain. Another thing that I find interesting in the physical book is that there's no chapter numbers, there's no chapter names. Each chapter just starts like this. You see that? There's nothing up here, and then it just starts. Which is fine, but if you only had the physical copy, and again you were like discussing this with a book club, it'd be pretty hard to reference like a specific chapter if that's what you needed to do. Like, oh, chapter 15. Well, which one's chapter 15? I don't know. Now granted, how many people actually need that? Probably not many, if any at all. But just one thing I noticed. Would I recommend this book? Honestly, it would depend. If somebody is not into sci-fi, or they're not into this writing style, this sort of prose, then probably not. But if they wanted something like, I don't know, kind of of whimsical, they do want this vibe, then yeah. Ultimately, if they asked me specifically about this book, oh, should I read it? I'd probably be like, yeah, go for it. I mean, it's this thick. So, in fact, in my book club, I was the one that suggested this book because, like I said earlier, I had been wanting to read it forever. I just hadn't gotten around to it. I needed that final push, so I put it in as a suggestion and mine was picked. This was the final push that I needed to be able to read it. And even if some of my book club members didn't like it, because we haven't had the book club to discuss it yet, so I can't say, ultimately I won't feel that guilty about it because this thick. If you read the book, what did you think about it? Was it confusing? Did you totally vibe with it? How did you go about reading it? Was it more about the vibes? Were you really trying to pay attention and take things more literally? Like, what was going on there? If you hadn't read it after watching this video, do you intend to? Does it sound like your vibe? And also, if you want to read this or purchase this, whatever, I will put a link in the description just so it's more accessible and easier to find for people. But yeah, this is how you lose the time war. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.